Chicago at night possessed a beauty both cold and mesmerizing. Skyscrapers cast their shadows upon the Michigan River. City lights stretched out like a brilliant golden silk, yet tinged with a haunting loneliness. On the 80th floor of James Global Holdings, a glass-walled room opened to a panoramic view of the city, and within that space stood a tall man, his stern features etched in light like a sculpted statue. Oswald James. The man, American media often called the investment king of the Midwest, stood silently before the glass. At 45, he possessed what millions dreamed of: a fortune, well beyond the billion-dollar mark, power that swayed the stock exchange, and a reputation that could silence any boardroom when he entered. And yet when Chicago glittered at its brightest, Oswald felt his heart colder than ever. So cold no warmth could fill it. He recalled a journalist once writing about him. Oswald James has everything except a genuine smile. He only gave a faint chuckle back then, dismissing it as a shallow headline. But now, standing alone in a room flooded with city lights, he realized it was painfully true. Oswald's life was a sequence of numbers. He lived for profits, for upward charts, for massive contracts. People admired him, feared him, but no one truly touched the inner world within him. Each morning his assistant prepared his coffee exactly as he liked it. Each evening he dined with politicians and business people of his rank. And each night he returned to a luxurious, almost frigid penthouse where every piece of furniture was flawless. Yet no trace of real life existed. No children's laughter, tiny slippers forgotten in a corner, no gentle music of a woman cooking dinner. And it was precisely that absence he had buried for years beneath his work. A soft knock sounded at the door. Barbara, his assistant of over 10 years, entered and placed an ivory-white envelope on the table. "There's a letter from the firm Anurin and Partners." Mr. James's voice was gentle, but her eyes flickered with hesitation. Oswald's brow furrowed. Anurin, a name he had buried deep in his heart. He didn't need to open it to know who it invoked. After Barbara left, he picked up the envelope. The feeling was strange. His hand trembled, something no financial crisis had ever made him do. Just a single name, Meliora Anurin. She had once been his wife. The only woman who ever made his heart truly warm. The one who brought him mornings scented with sweet coffee, laughter, filling their tiny apartment when they had nothing. And also the one who 6 years ago had left him walking out of a marriage where he had chosen wealth over love. He pressed the letter against his chest and closed his eyes. Memories poured in like a flood. Meliora's smile, her eyes sparkling as she spoke of her dream to become a lawyer, and that final moment when she turned away, a tear falling to the floor like a blade through his heart. "Not now," Oswald murmured, slipping the letter into a drawer and locking it. Tonight, he had a gala to attend, a place where numbers and handshakes reigned, not the past. The Glass Garden restaurant lay in the heart of Chicago, famed for its towering glass walls, its glittering light shimmering across every crystal glass. It was a place the elite treated as a symbol of power and luxury. Oswald appeared in a perfectly tailored suit, his stride firm, his sharp gaze commanding every look to follow him. He took the central seat at the table, surrounded by greetings and flattery. "Mr. James, I heard the Dallas project just surpassed $3 billion. Truly admirable vision, sir." He smiled in return, but inside he felt utterly hollow. Those praises sounded like the same tired tune played over and over. And then, in what seemed dull, his eyes suddenly froze upon a small table not far away. Meliora. She sat there poised, yet exuding a presence that faded the entire room. Her hair was shorter now, her face more mature, her eyes steady with the strength of a woman who had weathered many storms. But her smile was the same as 6 years ago, the smile that had once been his entire world. Oswald was stunned. Time seemed to stop. Then a sound struck his heart from that table children's laughter. 3 of them, about 5 years old, were chirping around Meliora. 1 boy, 2 girls. Oswald couldn't believe his eyes. The boy's icy blue eyes mirrored his own. 1 girl tilted her head like he always did when thinking. They were like tiny reflections of himself. He couldn't breathe. His body froze. Could it be? "Mr. James, are you all right?" A voice cut into his thoughts. Harold, a board member, watched him with concern. Oswald forced a reply. "I need some air." But instead of heading for the door, he walked toward that table. Meliora looked up. Their eyes met. Her smile vanished. The air turned rigid in an instant. "Oswald." Her voice was soft but clear, not angry, not tender, somewhat wary, restrained. The children stared at him curiously. One of the girls whispered, "Mom, who is that man?" Meliora grasped her child's hand, her eyes never leaving Oswald. "Just someone your mother once knew." Oswald's heart clenched. He wanted to ask, to shout, but all that escaped was a single strangled question. "They are..." Meliora cut him off, her gaze cold but trembling. "They are mine." The atmosphere inside, the glass garden that night, resembled a lavish painting often used to decorate the dreams of the upper class. Floor-to-ceiling glass walls reflected the shimmering glow of hundreds of chandeliers suspended in midair, like stars trapped in crystal cages. The soft piano blended with gentle laughter, the clinking of cutlery ringing like silver chimes. Everything was orchestrated to serve a ritual of power, where successful men and women signed agreements, traded trust, and engraved their names deeper through handshakes. Oswald James sat at the central table like a general at his victory feast. Around him were familiar faces from the world of finance, all smiling obsequiously, raising glasses of expensive wine, as though they were cradling their glory. He listened, replied, and even smiled at jokes that weren't funny. For others, being present here was a badge of pride. But for Oswald, it was merely routine, like a play whose lines and gestures he had memorized to the point of boredom. In that weary moment, his gaze drifted across the room to a small table at a distance. And the instant he saw it, his heart felt gripped in a vice. Meliora Anurin. She sat there composed in a deep blue dress that embraced her elegant yet strong form. Her short hair framed her face, revealing a proud, graceful neck. Beneath the glass lights, her skin gleamed with the warm tone of honey brown, alluring and confident, like a symphony of strength and tenderness. 6 years. It had been 6 years since the day she left him. And yet, when their eyes met, Oswald felt himself falter adrift, stripped of direction. Her smile was no longer his, but it still had the power to dim the entire room. And then, he heard the pure laughter of children ringing beside her. Oswald turned his head slightly, and his heart lurched. 3 children, 2 girls, and a boy around 5 years old. They clustered around Meliora, eyes sparkling with life. The boy sat closest to his mother, his dark hair sleek, but his eyes a piercing blue, the very color of Oswald's. One girl tilted her head, lips pressed together exactly as Oswald did whenever he pondered. The other girl beamed with dimples no different from Meliora in her 20s. Everything inside him collapsed at once. No need for calculations. 6 years. 3 children are about 5 years old. Everything aligned. They were his children. "Mr. James, are you all right?" Harold, a board member, leaned in with concern. Oswald gripped his wine glass tightly. The red liquid swirled, reflecting the lights like blood. He shot to his feet, nearly knocking his chair over. "I need some air." Without waiting for a response, Oswald left the table. But instead of heading for the door, his steps were pulled inexorably toward the table where Meliora sat. Meliora lifted her gaze as he approached. Time seemed to halt. On her face, the smile vanished, replaced with a tension she could not conceal. "Oswald." She breathed his name. That voice was the same as ever, warm, firm, but now weighed with distance. The three children turned to him, wide-eyed with curiosity. One little girl whispered, "Mom, who is that man?" Meliora clasped her child's hand. Her eyes locked on Oswald's. "Just someone your mother used to know, long ago." The words cut into him like an icy blade. Oswald stood frozen, his throat parched. He wanted to shout and declare the obvious truth across every feature of the children's faces. But all that escaped was a broken fragment. "They are..." Meliora's gaze held steady, as though she had prepared for this moment long ago. Her voice dropped firm. "They are mine." The children's innocent expressions showed no grasp of the weight in the adult's words. They only felt the air grow heavy. The boy pressed closer to his mother, his blue eyes flickering with fear and wonder. Oswald's body trembled. He wanted to reach out, touch them, and call each one by name. But Meliora's cold, guarded stare held him back. He swallowed hard, forcing his voice low. "Why didn't you tell me?" Meliora let out a faint laugh, empty of joy. "You think I never tried, Oswald? You changed your number, changed assistants. I called dozens of times and wrote dozens of letters. Every single one returned. Eventually, I understood you didn't want to be found." Her words struck him like hammer blows against his chest. He remembered those months after the marriage collapsed, when he buried himself in work, severed every tie and entombed every memory. He thought it was the only way not to hurt anymore. But now the price of that flight was 3 small lives he had never known. The world around them seemed to vanish. The chatter of the restaurant, the piano music, the glittering light all blurred away. Only 4 figures remained before him, Meliora and the 3 children. "I didn't know," Oswald whispered. Meliora looked straight into his eyes, her gaze both anguished and unyielding. "And if you had known, Oswald, would you have abandoned your empire to return to a woman and 3 little children? You never would. You made your choice 6 years ago." Her voice faltered, but her arms held her children tightly. Oswald wanted to protest, to say everything would have been different had he known. But deep inside, he knew she was right. 6 years ago, he was not the man he is now. 6 years ago, he was blind enough to believe money was everything. One little girl tugged at Meliora's hand, whispering, "Mom, I want ice cream." That clear, innocent voice softened the tension for a moment. Meliora bent down, smiling at her daughter, but the smile never reached her eyes. Oswald stood there watching the 3 children chatter excitedly about dessert. For the first time in his life, he felt utterly powerless. He could buy the entire restaurant with a signature, but for these children he had nothing. No memories, place, or voice to call his own. He turned away, the tightness in his chest suffocating. Curious eyes followed him at his table, but Oswald had no strength to acknowledge them. The wine in his glass now tasted only of bitterness. That night, Chicago still blazed bright as ever. But in Oswald's eyes, the entire city seemed shrouded in a heavy mist. From the moment he saw the boy's eyes, he knew his life would never be the same again. That night, Chicago sank into a dense fog. The streets along the Michigan River glistened with yellow lights, like long cuts across a darkened sky. Oswald James drove back to his familiar penthouse, but for the first time in years, he felt the place was no longer a home, if it had ever deserved to be called that. The car glided in silence, its engine so smooth it was almost non-existent. Yet inside Oswald's mind raged like a storm. Images of the three children kept flashing so vivid, he hardly dared to blink the boy's piercing blue eyes, the little girl's soft, flowing hair, the radiant smile with dimples. They were the pieces he had missed, the living proof of what he had once chosen to bury. He had missed their earliest years, their first wobbly steps, the first time they said, "Mom," the sound of laughter breaking through a rainy night, or the fever left a tiny body trembling in someone's arms. And in every one of those memories, his presence was completely absent. The penthouse door shut, swallowing Oswald into silence. A pale yellow light spilled across the polished wooden floor. Everything was in place. The black leather sofa without a single crease, the spotless glass table, the wine rack aligned like soldiers in formation. That perfection now suffocated him. Oswald sank onto the sofa and loosened his tie. His body felt heavy, but his mind was sharp to the point of pain. He remembered the envelope from earlier, the letter from Anurin and Partners. His trembling hand pulled it from the drawer. He carefully slid it open. A short sheet of paper slid out bearing the words regarding the legal rights of the three children. Oswald's heart clenched. There was no denying it. What he had seen at the restaurant wasn't an illusion. They truly were his children. The next morning, he arrived at the office earlier than usual. The city was still half asleep, dawn not yet piercing the thin veil of fog. The 80th floor office felt like an isolated peak where Oswald sat across from Barbara, his loyal assistant of over 10 years. "Barbara," his voice rasped, "I need you to answer me honestly about something." The middle-aged woman froze. She had never seen such an expression in her boss's eyes, a mixture of anger, pain, and fear. 5 years ago, Oswald continued, did someone named Meliora Anurin try to reach me? Barbara's face paled. She set down his coffee, her hands twisting together. "Yes, sir. Many times. She called. She wrote letters. But what?" Oswald nearly roared. "At that time, you had instructed your assistant, Amanda Reynolds, that you didn't want to receive any contact from the past. Amanda returned the letters and blocked the calls. I only took over afterwards." The room froze. Oswald sat motionless like a stone. Everything became clear. It wasn't Meliora who stayed silent. It wasn't that she cruelly hid the truth. She had tried, had called, had sent desperate words. But he, Oswald James, in his frenzy for power, had severed every line of connection. He let out a hollow laugh, brittle as shattered glass. How absurd. I locked my own heart, and then blamed her for leaving. Barbara looked at him with pity. At that moment she realized that the powerful billionaire before her was no longer a cold magnate, but simply a father grieving the life he had missed. "Prepare every file related to those letters," Oswald ordered, his voice hoarse. "Every line, every punctuation mark. I need to know exactly what she said." "But Amanda left years ago, sir. Those things might not exist. Find them." Oswald cut her off, his eyes blazing with determination. "Even if she threw them away, recover everything. I need the truth." Barbara nodded. When the door closed, Oswald leaned back in his chair. The high ceiling above suddenly felt distant, like the gulf between him and those children. Inside him surged two clashing tides, guilt so suffocating it crushed him, and a yearning to make amends. He had never known he could crave something so desperately, not a billion-dollar deal, not the praise of the press, but 3 simple words: Daddy. All day, Oswald couldn't focus on work. Every contract, every number blurred before his eyes. Instead, He pictured the children at a study desk, learning to write, or running in a park, calling Mom in their clear little voices. He wondered, did they ever ask about their father? Did they ever look at other families and whisper, "Why don't we have a daddy?" The thought stabbed his chest with unbearable pain. He, a man who once thought himself invincible, now felt small and powerless. That night, he returned to the penthouse late. The city was already asleep. On the table lay the documents Barbara had managed to recover, copies of old emails, a few surviving envelopes. Each letter appeared before him like a blade. Oswald, I know you're busy, but you must hear this. I'm pregnant. Do you remember the dream we once shared of a small home? We need to talk, not for me, but for the child. It's been weeks without a reply. Do you honestly not want to know about them? Every line felt like a sob from the past. Oswald's eyes blurred. For the first time in years, he truly wept. Not over losses, not from business pressure, but because of 3 children he had never once held. The next morning, Oswald arrived at the office early. He sat by the glass window watching the city slowly awaken. The sky grew brighter, but his mind remained trapped in darkness. Barbara entered and placed a business card on the desk. Meliora Anurin, attorney at law. She has an office in River North, Barbara said softly. If you genuinely wish to see her. Oswald picked up the card, running his fingers over the letters. It felt both familiar and foreign. 6 years ago, Meliora had been a gentle wife supporting his every step. 6 years later, she was an independent lawyer and a resilient mother. He drew a deep breath. It was time to face it. That afternoon, Oswald stood before a small red brick building in River North. It was humbler than any office he had ever entered. No towering glass walls, no lavish carpets, only a wooden sign carved with the name Anurin and Partners. He lifted his gaze, stopping at a window where light spilled out like a small but steady flame. Somewhere inside, Meliora might be bent over case files, thin framed glasses on her nose, calm, as if Oswald had never existed. His heart pounded wildly. His hand clenched around the business card. 6 years ago, he chose to turn away. But this time, he had no right to run. Oswald James took a long breath and stepped onto the threshold. The office door slowly opened, leading him into a new chapter of life, where the past, the present, and the future awaited his reckoning. On a March afternoon, Chicago had a strange kind of light. Not blazing like summer, not gloomy like winter. It spread thinly across River North streets, tinting old buildings red brick into a warm, tranquil hue. In front of the wooden door, carved with the name Anurin and Partners Oswald James, stood still for a long time. Wrapped in a gray overcoat, he still looked the image of a powerful man, but the familiar hardness in his eyes had vanished. In its place was a rare trace of hesitation, as if on this threshold he was no longer the billionaire revered across Chicago, but simply a man searching for what he had lost. He pushed the door open and stepped inside. The office was small and simple shelves, stacked with legal files and documents. A map hung on the wall, and a few green plants sat by sunlit windows. All of it was unfamiliar to Oswald, yet the faint fragrance from an oil diffuser stirred memories of Meliora's old kitchen, where she once cooked late dinners for him after long days. "Good afternoon, Mr. James." The voice rang out steady and firm. Meliora emerged from an inner room draped in a navy blazer, her stride confident, her face unmoved at seeing him. 6 years had changed her. From the gentle woman she once was, she now stood as an independent lawyer, her eyes bright and unwavering. "Meliora." Oswald's voice came hoarse. "It's been a long time. It truly has." She gave a slight nod, but her gaze did not soften. "Have you come here as a client? Or as a father?" The question cut like a blade, sharp and unrelenting. As a father, Oswald hesitated, his hand tightening around the business card in his pocket. Meliora gestured for him to sit. The small meeting room had only a wooden table and 2 chairs facing one another. She set a thick file before him. For 6 years, Oswald, you never appeared. Do you know how the children grew up? Do you know what it was like when they were sick with fever? When they asked about their father? What I had to tell them? Oswald bowed his head. Each word from her lips fell heavy as a hammer on his heart. I know, he whispered. I found the letters. I know you tried to reach me. But I was blind foolish. I didn't know Amanda had. Don't blame anyone else. Meliora cut him off, her voice sharp as steel. Letters or not, a true man never runs away. You chose to leave everything behind. I learned not to hope for you anymore. Oswald raised his head. His eyes burned with torment, brimming with unspoken apologies. I didn't come to justify myself. I came to ask for a chance. I want to be with my children, even if it is only a small part of their lives. Meliora was silent for a long while. Her face remained composed, but her hands trembled faintly on the table, as though suppressing a storm within. At last, she slid the file toward him. These are my conditions. Oswald opened the papers. His eyes scanned the carefully drafted terms. He had the right to see the children, but only under her supervision. He was forbidden to interfere with their upbringing, education, or future direction. All he could do was provide financial support if he wished. Most importantly, he must keep the press, the media, and the shadow of Oswald James's world far from them. Do you accept? Meliora looked him directly in the eye, her gaze firm, as if any hesitation would mean the end. Oswald fell silent. His heart screamed to object. He wanted to hear their laughter each morning, take them to school, and tell them bedtime stories. But he knew he had forfeited that right long ago. After a few moments of stillness, he nodded faintly. I accept, as long as I can be near them, even in fleeting moments. Meliora studied him closely, searching for sincerity in every line of his face. Her eyes flickered for an instant, but quickly regained their coldness. Oswald, understand this, she said slowly. Everything I do is for the children, not for you. They have grown used to a world without a father. You must ensure you don't vanish again if you enter their lives, because a second time would destroy them. I swear. His voice cracked, his trembling hands resting on the table. I swear I won't walk away again. She said nothing. In her deep, dark eyes, a storm seemed to flicker. But instead of surrendering to it, she stood collecting the file. Then we'll try. But let me warn you, one mistake, and you will never have another chance. Oswald left the office when evening had fallen. The sky over River North turned deep violet as the streetlights flickered on. He walked among the bustling crowd, yet felt hollow inside. Meliora's conditions were like chains binding him. But to him, they were also his only chance, a narrow, thorny, and cruel path still leading toward his 3 children. He stopped on an iron bridge overlooking the Chicago River. The water glittered under city lights, small boats drifting past. He thought he heard children's laughter in the wind, perhaps only the echo of his desperate longing. That night, Oswald sat in his penthouse, gazing out at the city ablaze with lights. For the first time in years, he didn't open his laptop or touch his phone. Instead, he pulled out an old photograph, the only one left of him and Meliora taken that autumn, before everything collapsed. He whispered, Meliora, I will prove to you. I'm no longer the man who ran away. Outside the city roared on. But within Oswald a resolve sparked. A small flame, fragile yet enduring. He knew the road ahead would not be easy, but at last he had begun to walk it. That afternoon, Chicago was draped in a rare, gentle shade. The sky was pale blue with white clouds, drifting slowly above, casting shadows over the quiet streets of Logan Square. Here, rows of red brick houses stood close together, surrounded by maple trees, just beginning to sprout new leaves. The scenery was utterly different from the glittering center of the city, the world Oswald James had known for so many years. He stood still in front of a small, two-story house, painted cream with an old tiled roof that radiated a simple warmth. On the wooden door hung a lavender wreath, as though someone had tried to breathe peace into this little space. Oswald suddenly realized his heart was pounding fast, each beat tight, like a whistle urging him forward. He had never feared any billion-dollar deal, nor trembled before hundreds of media cameras, but now, about to knock on this wooden door to meet the 3 children of his blood. His hand moved slowly, hesitantly, like an apprentice who had never known what fatherhood meant. The door opened. Standing before him was Meliora, wearing a simple cotton dress, her curly hair tied neatly at the back. Her gaze lingered on him for a few seconds, not as cold as the last time, but not warm either. "You came," she said softly. Oswald only nodded. He followed her inside. The house was warmly arranged, polished wooden floors, children's drawings hanging on the walls, and baked goods wafting from the kitchen. Everything made him feel like he had stepped into another world, a foreign yet strangely familiar world. And then he heard the sound of small feet pattering down the stairs. A child's voice rang out. "Mom, who's that?" Oswald turned. Before him stood a boy of about 5, with tousled curly hair and black eyes sparkling like jewels. He stopped at the last step, staring at Oswald with curiosity. Oswald's heart seemed to stop beating. "This is—" Meliora drew in a quiet breath, as though it took great effort to keep her voice even. "This is Oswald, Mommy's friend." The boy tilted his head, eyes shining. "Are you the man in the picture inside the wooden box, Mom?" The innocent question struck like lightning. Meliora stiffened, her face paling. Oswald looked at her, then at the boy, his son he was certain, and his throat tightened painfully. "Ethan," Meliora said gently, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Go call Emma and Noah down." The boy nodded, his eyes still fixed on Oswald with curiosity, then darted upstairs. Only minutes later, 2 small figures appeared at the staircase. A girl of about 8, slender. Her hair neatly braided her face, sharp and clever. And a more petite boy, likely only 3, clutching a teddy bear tightly in his arms. Oswald stood rooted. Before him were the 3 lives he had missed all these endless years. Children. "This is—" Oswald. Meliora introduced, her voice slow, weighing each word. "He's an old friend of Mommy's. Emma." The girl looked at him for a long time, her sharp eyes a mirror image of Meliora's. "I saw your picture once, in Mom's box in the cupboard." Meliora frowned slightly, but said nothing. Oswald felt his hand tremble. He wanted to rush forward and embrace them all, but feared frightening them. He forced his voice gentle, almost a whisper. "Hello, Emma, Ethan, and Noah." All 3 looked up at him, eyes wide. He had already learned their names from the files Meliora had given him, but now speaking them aloud, each name seemed to carve itself into his very skin, leaving marks so deep he struggled to hold back tears. Silence stretched on. At last, little Noah, the youngest, ran forward holding his teddy bear toward Oswald. "Do you want to play with Teddy?" The innocent words melted Oswald's heart. He knelt, accepting the toy, his smile awkward, but his eyes brimming with tenderness. "Teddy is wonderful." Noah laughed brightly, his eyes sparkling. Emma, however, remained still, her brows furrowed slightly, as though trying to read the stranger before her. And Ethan. The first boy stepped closer, asking in a small voice, "Are you Daddy?" The room held its breath. Meliora clasped her hands tightly. Oswald wanted to weep, but smiled faintly, looking straight into his son's eyes. I hope one day you'll let me be your daddy." Ethan's eyes blinked rapidly. Then he ran to Meliora, wrapping his arms around her. Emma quickly moved to his side, encircling him protectively. The invisible distance rose again, a cold wall between them. Meliora broke the silence. "All right, children, play in the yard. Mommy needs to speak with Oswald for a moment." The three little ones hesitated, then headed toward the backyard. Before leaving, Noah turned back, flashing Oswald a smile that nearly undid him completely. When the door closed, only the two adults remained. Meliora folded her arms, her gaze sharp. "You see now," she said quietly, "they're not ready. Don't expect a few looks or words to erase every wound." "I know." Oswald bowed his head. "But thank you for letting me see them. Even now. This chance isn't for you. It's for them. If you ever hurt them again, I'll never forgive you." Oswald was silent for a long time. He sat on the sofa, his eyes drawn to the window leading to the yard. The children played on the grass. Noah was toddling with Teddy. Ethan was perched on the swing. Emma was standing close by, and her small frame was protective like a guardian sister. The sight was breathtaking. A simple world he had never touched, but now longed for with burning intensity. Meliora noticed his gaze and faltered slightly. For a fleeting second, memories of the past washed over her. Oswald patiently taught her piano during their evening walks along Lake Michigan. But just as quickly, she rebuilt her hardened shell. Meliora, Oswald spoke, his tone steadier. "Now I won't give up. No matter how many walls you build, I'll remain here, not for me, but for them." She looked at him, her eyes wavering briefly. But instead of answering, she turned away, opening the window to let in the evening breeze. Oswald knew the road to reach his children's hearts and Meliora's would be longer and harder than any deal he had ever struck. But the moment he heard one child call him Dad, even in a hesitant question, was enough to fuel his resolve to keep moving forward. Night fell over the Logan Square neighborhood. Street lights cast their golden glow through the window, laying a gentle sheen over the living room. After Oswald left, Meliora sat quietly alone on the sofa. Outside, the April wind whistled through the leaves, stirring a storm of memories she had long tried to bury. The image of Oswald kneeling gently, taking the teddy bear from little Noah's tiny hand, then looking straight into Ethan's eyes as he said, "I hope one day you'll let me be your daddy," kept echoing in her ears. Something profound in Meliora's heart had trembled, quivering like a shard of glass caught in the wind. But immediately, her reason gripped tight, rebuilding the tall, sturdy wall. Because she had not forgotten. Meliora recalled the early days with Oswald. She was only a young student, working part-time at Columbia University's library. She met him at an economics seminar. She wore only a simple linen dress among hundreds of sharply dressed attendees, clutching a bundle of old documents. And yet Oswald's eyes lingered on her longer than they should have. In the days after, he found excuses to visit the library more often, pretending to look for books, pretending to ask questions. At the time, Meliora had no idea who he truly was. To her, he was simply a tall man, neatly dressed with a warm smile. They spoke for hours on unrelated topics, Roman history, Harlem jazz. Then Meliora first believed love could transcend skin color, origin, and status. But that belief turned out to be too fragile. She remembered vividly the Manhattan Gala, the night she accidentally discovered the truth about Oswald. He was not merely the kind man at the library, but Oswald James, the owner of a real estate empire worth tens of billions. The man the media called Chicago's Ice Prince. She stood in the lavish ballroom, wearing the modest dress she had sewn herself, feeling as though she had wandered into a world that did not belong to her. The scornful eyes of wealthy women, the whispering dripping with mockery. Who is she? Looks like a sparrow lost among peacocks. The pain struck hardest when she saw Oswald remain silent. He didn't deny them. He stood still, letting the sneers wash over them, only tightening his grip on her hand. But that very hand at that moment made her feel smaller, more invisible than ever. Tonight, seeing him inside her small home standing near their children, the memory surged back with force. Meliora not only remembered the humiliation of that night, but also the dark, rainy evening when she discovered she was pregnant. At that time, Oswald was consumed by billion-dollar deals. His phone never stopped ringing. When Meliora called to tell him she was pregnant, his first reaction wasn't joy, it was silence. And then he said, "Meliora, now is not the time." That sentence sliced her hopes clean in half. She remembered clearly the night she left. The rain poured heavily. She dragged a small suitcase, leaving behind the extravagant penthouse in downtown Chicago. Inside her was the tiny life just beginning, and in her heart, a despair too heavy to bear. She left no message, never looked back. She feared that if she turned around, Oswald's eyes would weaken her resolve, and she would end up trapped again in his world, a world she never truly belonged to. Meliora survived the harsh months alone, attending prenatal checkups by herself, working herself to exhaustion to support the baby, and enduring sleepless nights with 3 children crying endlessly. Each time she saw Oswald in the news beside glamorous women, her heart clenched, but her lips pressed tight so she could keep moving forward. That is why Meliora could not immediately believe him when he said he wouldn't give up today. She knew his eyes were sincere, but could that sincerity be enough to mend the cracks in her heart and shield the children from the storms of public judgment? What she feared most was that her children would endure the same scorn she once did. Society had never been kind to mixed-blood children. She didn't want them growing up under the eyes of prejudice, nor becoming entertainment fodder for the press. Meliora leaned back on the sofa, eyes shut tight. Outside the window, her children's laughter still rang from the garden. They were carefree, innocent, unaware of the storms raging between adults. A part of her wanted to let Oswald in, to let the children have a birth father. But another part, the part that had been wounded, still trembled in fear. Has he truly changed? The question circled in her mind again and again. In the bedroom drawer, Meliora kept a letter she had written to Oswald during the early days of her pregnancy. That letter had never been sent. She wrote in it the joy of becoming a mother, the fear of a dim future, and the fragile hope that he would protect them both. But then, remembering his cold voice on the phone, she had torn the letter in half. Tonight, sitting alone, she remembered those words again. The memory was sweet and bitter, a knife cut deep, and a flame warming the ashes. Meliora opened the window, drawing a deep breath. The night wind brushed her face, lifting stray strands of hair. Deep inside, she knew Oswald had changed. He was no longer the billionaire who only buried himself in deals. She had seen a trembling sincerity in his eyes today, the tremor only found in a father yearning to be near his children. But fear still clung to her. If tomorrow the press discovered the truth, if that glittering world turned its back once more, what would become of her children? Meliora closed her eyes, placing a hand over her heart. She whispered, as though making a promise to herself, "If you genuinely wish to step in, You must prove it. Not with words, but with actions, with patience, with your heart. Somewhere out there, Oswald was surely awake as well. And Meliora understood the real storm had only just begun. Morning in Logan Square began with the faint aroma of pancakes drifting from the small kitchen. Meliora stood by the stove, apron tied neatly, her soft black hair falling over her shoulders. The three children giggled and chattered at the table, helping their mother set dishes while fighting playfully over spoons. That cozy atmosphere familiar to Meliora now carried a new presence, Oswald James. He stood silently at the kitchen doorway, dressed in a simple shirt, something he hadn't worn in years. No tailored suits, no cold demeanor of a corporate magnate. Only a man, his eyes hesitant as he looked at the three children, as though learning how to step into an entirely different world. Ethan glanced up, his expression mixed with curiosity and caution. Noah giggled while Lily cast a nervous glance at her mother. Meliora slightly nodded, a subtle signal that the children could allow him closer. Oswald drew a deep breath, stepping toward the table. He bent slightly, resting a hand on the chair beside Lily. Can Daddy sit here? His voice trembled lightly, like someone relearning how to call himself by that name. Lily pressed her lips together, then gave a slight nod. Noah exclaimed, "Now we have one more person to eat pancakes with." The whole table burst into laughter, except Ethan. The boy continued to watch closely, his dark eyes probing Oswald's every move. Meliora poured more milk into a glass to keep the air light, but even she noticed her hand trembling slightly as she set the cup down. Oswald picked up a fork, but his movements were clumsy. For years he had been used to mornings in his luxurious penthouse, where a private chef prepared meals, arranged perfectly down to each slice of orange. He had never handled batter, nor sat at a messy breakfast table with children. Noah stared curiously. "Daddy, do you know how to cut pancakes?" The question made everyone laugh. Oswald flushed, fumbling as he tried to cut, but the knife slipped and the pancake fell onto the table. He scrambled to pick it up as Lily covered her mouth, giggling. Ethan muttered coldly, "Isn't it easy? Anyone can do it." Oswald didn't argue. He stayed quiet, carefully trying again, slower this time, focused as though signing a critical contract. When he finally cut a neat piece, he placed it on Noah's plate. "Here you go. Daddy, we'll learn little by little." That simple sentence made Noah beam, while Ethan lowered his gaze without realizing it. After breakfast, Meliora let the children play in the backyard. The morning sun spilled gold over the green lawn tulips just beginning to bloom. Oswald followed, watching them kick a ball. Noah ran toward him, ball in hand. "Daddy, kick with me." Oswald hesitated. He had never played soccer or spent time on things like this, but Noah's eager eyes made it impossible to refuse. He slipped off his shoes and rolled the ball gently. Noah laughed brightly, chasing after it and kicking it back. The game began awkward at first, but slowly more natural. Laughter filled the yard. Lily joined in too, her pigtails bouncing with each step. Only Ethan stayed still in the corner, arms crossed. Oswald noticed. He walked over, crouching to meet the boy's eyes. "Don't you want to play?" Ethan shrugged. "I don't need to." In those eyes, Oswald saw a reflection of himself years ago, a boy yearning for love, but choosing to hide behind indifference. He didn't push. He placed a gentle hand on Ethan's shoulder and said softly, "That's okay. Daddy will be here whenever you're ready." When the children returned inside, Meliora cleared the table, while Oswald's eyes landed on a photo frame on the wooden shelf, a picture of the three kids on their first day of school. In the photo, Meliora smiled radiantly, but her eyes held fatigue. He touched the frame, his heart tightening. While he drowned in glory and negotiations, all those years, Meliora had carried this entire world alone. When he turned, he caught Meliora's gaze. She remained silent, but he sensed a faint softening in her eyes. Not forgiveness, but acknowledgement of his clumsy, sincere efforts. That afternoon, as the family sat in the living room, Lily tugged at Oswald's sleeve. "Daddy read me a story." Oswald froze. He had never done this before. His world had been thick contracts, not children's books. But faced with his daughter's wide eyes, he couldn't refuse. He held the book, his voice stiff and monotone at first. After a few minutes, Lily giggled. "Daddy, you sound like a robot." Noah laughed too, and even Ethan smirked faintly. Oswald blinked, then smiled. He tried again, changing his tone, imitating a dragon, then a princess. The children burst into laughter, and even Ethan let out a small laugh. At that moment, Oswald realized that happiness could be as simple as sitting in a warm room and listening to children's laughter. When the children were asleep, the house returned to silence. Oswald stepped onto the porch, gazing at the Chicago skyline glittering with city lights. Meliora stood nearby, wordless. "I never thought I could be so clumsy," Oswald said with a soft laugh full of self-mockery. Meliora looked at him, her eyes gentler. "Children don't need perfection, Oswald. They need presence." He turned toward her, his eyes brimming with unspoken words. But he only nodded, as if making a silent promise. That night, Oswald found it hard to sleep. Images filled his mind. Noah's laughter chasing the ball, Lily giggling at his silly voices, Ethan's cautious but searching eyes. He knew this was only the beginning. The road to becoming a true father would be long and hard. But he also knew, this time he would not give up. Meliora quietly opened the door in the next room, watching him through the sliver of light. A tiny seed of trust had been planted inside her heart, fragile but already beginning to sprout. The morning in Chicago seemed peaceful as always. Spring sunlight poured down on the red brick streets, and the distant sound of streetcar bells rang through the air. Inside the small house in Logan Square, Meliora was preparing breakfast as usual, while the three children chattered around the table. Yet in another corner of the city, the morning papers all carried the same image of Oswald James. On the front page of a major financial newspaper, a photograph of Oswald stepping out of the red brick house with three children caused an immediate uproar. The bold headline read, "Billionaire Oswald James secretly has children. Who is the mysterious woman in Logan Square?" The news spread like wildfire. Tabloids rushed to speculate. Some claimed it was the hidden love affair of the cold-hearted billionaire. Others insisted it was a scandal that could shake the foundations of James Corporation. Oswald's phone rang non-stop. His senior assistant called the company's board of directors called, and even international investors sent urgent emails. But he ignored them all. That morning, he chose to sit beside Lily instead, helping her tie her shoelaces as if the storm outside didn't exist. Meliora held the newspaper a neighbor had handed her, her hand trembling slightly. Her eyes scanned the mocking lines and malicious speculations. She had grown accustomed to living quietly, hiding the truth for years. Now that fragile peace was on the verge of shattering. "Mel, don't worry," Oswald said softly, his voice low and steady. "Don't worry. The whole city is in an uproar. The children, they'll hear it. They'll read it." Her voice caught. She clutched the newspaper tightly as if the whole world were peering into her every breath. Ethan, the boy who rarely spoke quietly, studied his father. One unspoken question lingered in his young yet perceptive eyes. "Are you here or just passing through?" He said nothing, only turned away. But Oswald could feel that distance keenly. It wasn't merely the caution of a child toward a stranger who claimed to be his father. It was the fear of being abandoned once again. Inside the glass tower in the city center, the James Corporation board sat around a long table. The atmosphere was tense. A financial director slammed the paper onto the table. "We're facing a potential stock crash. The Japanese investors have already called. They want answers immediately." Another executive snapped, "We need an official press release. Either deny it or come clean." "Mr. James, do you think you can stay silent forever?" Oswald sat at the head of the table, his gaze turning cold. He had faced hundreds of billion-dollar deals, but his heart was no longer an unfeeling block of ice this time. He knew one wrong move could hurt Meliora and the children. "There will be a statement, but I'll be the one to write it," he said firmly, shutting down further debate. When the children were asleep that evening, Meliora stepped out onto the porch. She sat on the steps, her hands clutching a cup of tea, though her chest felt frozen. "Oswald, do you understand? I've spent years building a peaceful life for the children. Now with just one photo, everything could collapse." Oswald quietly sat beside her, his large hand covering hers. "I understand, and I'll protect you, protect the children, even if it costs me everything." Meliora looked at him, her eyes torn between belief and doubt. How many times in the past had he made promises? How many times had she believed only to be disappointed? The next day, the whispers began when Meliora took the children to school. Some parents stared at her curiously, and others whispered behind her back. Lily asked innocently, "Mommy, why is everyone looking at us?" Meliora bent down, stroking her daughter's hair. "It's nothing, sweetheart. They're just curious." But inside her, the worry rose like a tidal wave. Oswald walked into the living room, holding a press release draft that evening. He handed it to Meliora. She read it, each word tightening her chest. "I, Oswald James, acknowledge that the 3 children in the circulated images are indeed my biological children. I apologize for allowing them and their mother to live silently for many years. Today, I will fulfill my responsibilities as a father and man." Meliora looked up in shock. "Do you realize what this will do to your career?" Oswald smiled faintly, but his eyes shone with an unshakable resolve. "I've spent too many years protecting meaningless things. This time, I want to protect what truly belongs to me." When the statement was released, the media exploded. Newspapers ran the story everywhere. Some praised him as courageous, others mocked him as weak. James Corporation's stock price fluctuated wildly, but what mattered more to Oswald was the safety of Meliora and the children. Paparazzi swarmed outside the red brick house. Flashbulbs flickered relentlessly. Inside, Lily cried in fear. Noah shouted angrily at the window, while Ethan stayed silent, his hands clenched tightly. Meliora held the children close, glancing at Oswald with pleading eyes. He stepped onto the porch, standing before the door like a wall. "Get out of here! This is not your hunting ground!" He roared for the first time, losing his usual composure. When the crowd finally dispersed, the house was heavy with silence. Meliora sank into a chair, her eyes red. "Oswald, I'm scared. I'm afraid the children won't be able to handle this. I'm so frightened they'll hate you, hate me too." Oswald knelt in front of her, his hands gripping hers tightly. "I know. But Mel, if we keep hiding, they'll hate us even more. They'll hate us for not being brave enough to acknowledge that they exist." Tears slid down Meliora's cheeks. In that moment, her heart stirred not because of sweet words, but because for the first time, Oswald was truly vulnerable, putting family above career. Late at night, with the city still glowing bright, Oswald stood by the window. He gazed at the skyline, where the financial towers rose high, but his thoughts stayed with the small house, He whispered, as if vowing to himself, "No matter how fierce the storm outside, I won't back down. This time, I won't leave you and the children behind." In the next room, Meliora shifted in her sleep, her eyes closed, yet inside her rose a strange feeling. Amid the media storm, perhaps for the first time, she saw in Oswald's eyes not the cold-hearted billionaire, but a man learning how to be a father, a husband, a pillar of strength. Chicago had never slept soundly, but the city grew even noisier and more chaotic these days. Every newspaper, every television broadcast, every line on social media revolved around one name: Oswald James. The cold billionaire suddenly admits to having 3 children out of wedlock. James Corporation. An empire shaken by family scandal. The mysterious woman named Meliora Anurin. Who is she? The news spread like a net, tightening around Meliora's small life. The doors of the little red brick house that once kept peace now seemed unable to block out the prying eyes. At school, Lily began hearing questions innocent in tone, but sharp as knives. "Is your dad a billionaire? Why didn't you ever say anything before?" Noah, hot-tempered by nature, was quick to jump into a fight when a classmate sneered, "Your mom must be pretty good to have snagged him." And Ethan, he grew quieter than ever. In his deep eyes lingered unspoken questions. If he is our father, why did we have to live in silence all these years? Her heart clenched when Meliora heard that her son had nearly been suspended. What she feared most was becoming real. The children being dragged into the whirlwind of public judgment that never should have been theirs to bear. One evening, after the children were in bed, Meliora walked into the living room where Oswald sat before his laptop. The blue glow lit his face, making it appear darker still. "What did you receive?" she asked. Oswald closed the screen slightly, his eyes pausing on her face. "Just some emails from the board. They want me to reconsider going public. A few rivals are taking advantage of this." Meliora stepped closer, suspicion flickering in her gaze. "Rivals? Who do you mean?" Oswald hesitated. Then he said, "Edward Collins. You remember that name, don't you?" Her heart tightened instantly. Collins, the man who once pursued her in the days she raised her children alone, who sweetly promised protection. But when she refused, he turned away, leaving only a gaze full of undisguised hatred. Collins had long been Oswald's rival in business. Years ago, he lost a major merger battle, and ever since he had sought chances for revenge. Now, with the family scandal, Collins struck gold. Suddenly, the media was flooded with anonymous articles twisting the story that Oswald abandoned Meliora back then, that he never wanted the children, that he only came forward now out of fear of losing his position at the company. Meliora read those lines, her heart trembling. She knew who was behind it, but the truth was, the past still held dark fragments Oswald had never fully explained. Late at night, unable to sleep, Meliora stepped onto the porch where the streetlights shone through the window panes. Oswald stood there holding an unlit cigar, eyes staring into the distance. "Oswald?" Her voice quivered. "Is what they're saying true? Back then, did you leave because you were afraid of scandal?" He turned his eyes, growing solemn. A silence stretched on endlessly. "Mel, back then, I didn't have the courage. I didn't love you, not because I was too afraid. Afraid of losing the empire I built. I was a coward, and I know I left you to endure it all alone for so many years." Hot tears streamed down Meliora's cheeks. That answer was the truth she had long suspected, and a blade twisting in an old wound. The next day, Collins sent Meliora a public invitation to attend a lavish charity gala at the Palmer House Hotel. The press immediately seized on it as if waiting. What does he want? Oswald scowled as he read the headline. Meliora stayed silent. Inside her old wounds and fresh doubts churned. He may want to use you to bring me down. Oswald said, his voice deep and hard. You cannot go. Meliora looked up, her eyes flashing. You think I'm a puppet? You chose to leave me back then, and now you want to choose for me again. The words cut like cold steel. Oswald froze. In Meliora's eyes, he saw it clearly. Trust that had barely sprouted was already beginning to waver. Meliora returned to her room and shut the door. Sitting on the edge of the bed, she clutched her chest. She remembered the endless nights caring for the children alone, the times Ethan burned with fever, with no one at her side. She had once hated, once tried to forget. But now, with the past unearthed wounds, she thought healed began to bleed anew. In the mirror, her face revealed the struggle torn between a love once burning and a trust just beginning to grow between painful memories and fragile hope. In those stormy days, Ethan the Quiet unexpectedly sought out Oswald. Dad. His voice was small but firm. I want to know, are you staying? Or one day when everything is calm again, will you leave us? Oswald froze. That question tore open his deepest wound. He knelt, looking directly into his son's eyes. Ethan, I once failed. But now I swear I will not leave you or your siblings. Even if the whole world turns its back, I'll still be here. Ethan gave no reply. He only nodded slightly, but in his gaze, complete trust had yet to return. While the family faltered, James Corporation faced its undercurrents. The board discussed bringing Collins, once defeated by Oswald, back as an independent advisor to reassure shareholders. Some votes had already swung to Collins. The power game was unfolding silently, and the family scandal had become the knife stabbing into Oswald's back. One evening, Meliora sat alone in the small room. Outside, rain tapped steadily on the eaves. In her hand was the invitation to Collins's gala. Inside her, turmoil raged. If she went, she would fall into his trap. But if she didn't, would she lose the chance to uncover the truth behind it all? Oswald's eyes suddenly surfaced in her mind, sometimes resolute, sometimes regretful. She wanted to believe, but that belief was like a faint flame before a violent wind. That night, Chicago seemed cloaked in a shimmering velvet robe. Golden light from thousands of windows spilled onto the streets, blending with the flow of cars, to create a luxurious and cold portrait. The Palmer House Hotel, a long stage for legendary galas, has become the center of media attention. Outside, a long line of luxury cars trailed in, while photographers' flashes burst continuously like tiny lightning bolts ripping through the night. Meliora stood before the mirror in a small dressing room at the hotel. She wore a midnight blue silk gown that embraced her curves yet retained elegance. Around her neck hung a simple silver necklace, the gift Oswald had once given her years ago, tarnished with time but still gleaming beneath the light. She brushed her fingers across her face. In the mirror was no longer the fragile woman of lonely years past. Before her stood a Meliora, matured, proud, yet deep within her heart, still surged with storms. Music floated faintly from the grand hall. As Meliora stepped in, nearly every gaze turned to her. Whispered voices rustled like a restless breeze. Is that her, Meliora? The woman who made Oswald James admit his children. Beautiful. But is that enough to stand against Collins's power? She drew in a deep breath and strolled. Each step felt like treading across layers of undercurrents from public opinion. Collins appeared at the hall's center, clad in a perfect black tuxedo, his smile confident to the point of arrogance. When he saw Meliora, he approached, bowing with courtesy. Meliora, at last. You've come. I've waited for this moment a long time. Collins led Meliora to the central table, where reporters jostled for photos. Every eye in the grand hall was fixed upon them. He raised his glass of wine, his deep voice echoing, "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight, I have the honor of welcoming a very special guest. A woman is strong in love and courageous enough to face the truth." Scattered applause rose, mingled with scrutinizing stares. Meliora pressed her lips together, knowing she was being turned into a pawn in the chess match Collins had set up. At that moment, a familiar figure entered. Oswald James. He wore a charcoal gray suit, his stride composed, though his gaze cut like steel. His appearance threw the hall into uproar. Photographers went wild, cameras firing relentlessly. Collins smirked. At last, the main character arrives. Oswald strode straight toward the table where Meliora sat. He stopped, his eyes locking with Collins's. No words were needed. The tension stretched tight as a drawn bowstring. Collins. Oswald's voice was deep, decisive. Don't drag her into your games. Collins gave a cold laugh. Games, Oswald? I only want the truth to be seen. Or are you afraid this truth will destroy what you've built so carefully? The crowd murmured in agitation. Meliora sat there, her heart pounding wildly. Suddenly she realized this moment would not only determine Oswald's honor, but also decide whether their relationship still had a path forward. Collins clapped his hands. A giant screen lit up, displaying a series of old blurry photographs. Meliora carrying 3 small children in her arms, trudging through a poor neighborhood. While he lived in luxury, Collins's voice rang out. She and her children struggled daily. This is the man you call a leader. Whispers and heated discussions rippled across the room. A few board members in the back frowned, nodding. Collins had struck at the weakest point, abandonment. Meliora stared at the images, her hand tightening around her wine glass. The pain of those years surged back, but at the same time she remembered recent months, Oswald picking up the children from school, staying up all night through Noah's fever, silently sitting to listen as Lily practiced piano. She rose to her feet. Yes. Meliora's voice rang out, silencing the entire hall. What you see is true. I raised the children alone. I lived through the hardest of years. Collins smiled triumphantly. But then Meliora continued. But another truth you don't know, Collins, is that he, Oswald James, came back, not to hide or protect his status, but to be a father. He entered my children's lives and mine with all the sincerity he has. The hall fell still. Collins froze for an instant, his smile stiffening. Oswald looked at Meliora, emotion and gratitude welling in his eyes. Without hesitation, Oswald stepped forward, wrapped Meliora in his arms before everyone, and kissed her long and deep, a vow amid the raging storm. The hall erupted. Some clapped, some snapped photos, some whispered, but none of it mattered. In the dazzling ballroom, only 2 hearts remained, finding each other again after so much loss. Collins's face darkened, his hand curling into a tight fist. He knew this move had failed. As they left the hotel, a crowd of reporters pressed in. But this time, Oswald did not evade. He held Meliora's hand firmly, his back straight. Yes, I once made mistakes. But tonight, I declare Meliora Anurin, and the children are my family. Whoever wishes to fight me, so be it. But I will not retreat ever again. Flashes burst in blinding waves. But within Meliora, a rare and quiet peace slowly spread. That night at the gala, Meliora did not only face Collins, but also the past within herself. Before hundreds of people, Oswald chose to make his love and responsibility public. There was no turning back. From here, the battle for power could grow even more brutal, and public opinion could surge even more fiercely. But at the very least, their trust had a chance to be reborn. If you too can feel the breathless tension, the drama, and the rush of emotion in this moment, leave a like to show your support. Write a comment to share your feelings, and follow the channel to continue with me into the next chapters, where the storms of business and the trials of love will be fiercer than ever before.